Hi, friend.
Hi, friend.
And to the brave hearts listening out there, welcome to Permission to be Human. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Janelle.
Get ready for some real-time relationship woo and wisdom
from the front lines with occasional tantrums and tears
about how breaking rules, blurring boundaries, and tossing tradition can be catalysts for finding your truth.
Let's debunk the fairy tales we were told as children and create a new map for life.
Yes, Disney can go fuck itself.
If you're seeking permission to choose your own path,
freedom is the new F word, people,
and want to feel less alone along the way,
we got you. Please note, this is our side of the story. Our partners and metamours have their own individual experiences, and we do not speak for them.
Hey, Andrea.
Hey, Janelle.
Welcome to Season 2
of Permission to be Human. We are back. We're so happy to be back with our Bravehearts.
Yeah, it's been a really needed and exciting month off. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that's so exciting is that while we were not recording podcasts, we were actually meeting with Bravehearts in real life.
In real life, IRL people. Like, so excited about meeting Bravehearts in person, hosting them here at the Goddess Temple.
And also on the road. I met some in Philadelphia as well as Boston. And we are, these are called Braveheart Conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're having women only, we're having men only, we're having co-ed. We're trying this out so we can interface in person with our Bravehearts. And the first couple were a smashing success.
Yes. The other thing that you're noticing potentially is if you can see us.
Yeah.
Depending on how you're listening, actually. It could just be a reel that you're catching, but we are going to start videoing ourselves as we're talking so you can see us in our everyday fabulous clothes, whatever we feel like wearing.
In our radiance, right? And we're wearing spirit crowns. Mm-hmm. You might remember these from maybe some beginning episodes where we used to wear them, but we do love our spirit crowns. I feel elevated already.
Yes. The spirit crowns made by Sophie Howell are really an extension of our brand because they anoint an energetic that's within us that is called up and out, that helps us feel whatever, more beautiful, more elevated, more radiant, more of a goddess, and which is how we want to move through the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. And you can get your own at spiritcrowns.com.
The other exciting thing that happened in our month off is that we hosted our very first Braveheart retreat.
Braveheart retreat. Yay!
Woo, woo, woo. And that was here at the Goddess Temple. And it was an intimate gathering. And we had a private chef. We had women fly in from all over. And it was a facilitated experience by me and by Andrea. And the women left. The goal was it was a retreat that you learned a lot. You experienced magic. You were in the presence of other magical, incredible women who get to share each other's medicine with each other, just in the organic way of sitting in front of the fireplace, going for a walk, sleeping in, and then maybe journaling or meditating in the Golden Temple or
spaciousness. So much flow and spaciousness. So what are like the 3 or 4 topics that you talked about?
So we talked about the wheel of consent, which is foundational, in my opinion, to being able to ask for what you want.
Yay.
We talked about personal branding.
Yeah, building your intuitive personal brand. So I sat with the Bravehearts and did a lot of spotlight coaching about helping them bloom and broadcast their intuitive whispers and weaving that into their personal brand. So much fun in the Golden Temple.
Yeah, incredible. We had some fun too. We're not going to disclose everything that happened, of course, because part of it is in the mystery of what gets revealed.
Sure.
And I would also say spirit crowns were featured. And we also talked about pleasure. And, had conversations around how is it that we can become more embodied in asking for what we want, and how do we ask for what we want is by knowing what we want, and how do we know what we want is by listening to our bodies. And so we worked through some tools and ways of how to listen to our bodies more.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in the spirit of Braveheart Conversations, our new event, and the Braveheart Retreat, this episode is going to be all about Q&A that we got at this Braveheart Conversation. So let's give them an idea of what a Braveheart Conversation night looks like.
Yes. It is 2 hours, and if they're in Denver, then you come to the Goddess Temple, and we gather, essentially.
There's a glitter ritual as you walk in, as you've heard us talk about. There are introductions. There's a meditation.
Yep. And then there's the option we're gathering, we're sitting upstairs in the Golden Temple, and then we do just like a mini dyad workshop of where you're listening to one another, and then everyone gets to put a question in
the golden bowl.
In the golden bowl, an anonymous question, and then we pick them out of the hat. Andrea and I answer them, but not in the answer of like, oh, here's how the answer is to, we're not solving the world's problems or your problems, but we are giving our perspective on what the question is, and then we open it up. So it becomes a conversation, because that was what was so beautiful, was that there was so much wisdom in the room.
There really was.
That we were like, oh, here's my perspective. And someone's like, yeah, but what about this? And we're like, oh my gosh, amazing.
Great point.
Great point.
And people came away from this describing their experience, their feeling at the end of the Braveheart Conversation as being content, sweet, peaceful, less alone.
Hopeful.
Okay. Just beautiful endings to that 2-hour conversation. So
yes.
it was so exciting to witness all of these people being together and really just a lot of human and feminine connection.
Right. And I hosted the one in Philadelphia. It was actually for men only. And of course, I was there. I identify as a female and as a woman. And it was so beautiful for me to feel welcomed into that space. It still felt like a men's circle, because all I was doing was facilitating a space for them to actually be in communication with one another and to be asking questions of me, but really of each other. And one of the exciting things too, like the most exciting thing for me, was that they actually all asked for their contact information so that they could get together on their own after, since I don't live there.
Yeah, and I would say, something you mentioned was that there's a lot of men's circles, and that's
in Colorado for sure.
Right, that's a way that men have come together. I know that from my partner and different men that I know. But I'd say the difference, I wasn't there, but so what would you say the difference is in the men conversation that with a female host versus a male host, right?
Well, but I can't speak to it.
Right, because you've never been to a male one.
Right. Right.
But I guess in general, that is the difference. There's feminine energy being infused. That's all we know, right? As opposed to male.
Right. And I would also say one of the men did have a men's group. He didn't call it like a men's circle, but, it was the men that he had gathered with. I think what really, at least what they spoke to, was that they were in a group of men who are willing to be vulnerable about questions that they had regarding their relationships, regarding pleasure and intimacy, and that they didn't have other men. Like, that was what was so enlightening and hopeful for them, was that it didn't matter that I was there or not, but they were in the presence of other men who were willing to have these conversations.
Beautiful. Okay. Well, should we get into our Braveheart Conversation review? Oh, and one more thing about the Braveheart Conversations. They are currently not being recorded on the podcast. So don't think that you're coming here and then you're going to be in the podcast and everyone's going to be hearing what you're saying. Oh. They are private, confidential experiences. I just want to clarify that.
Yes, thank you. The in real life is that we are gathering in real life, but this is not a podcast recording.
No.
What we're doing right now is we're bringing some of the questions to the podcast. But yes, the Braveheart Conversations are not recorded events.
Correct, not public. So, what is our first question?
Okay. The first question, and the question was, where do you feel stuck?
And one of these little notes said, how can I make self-pleasure feel more pleasurable? And what did we say? We said a few things.
One was that not having a goal to it has to be orgasm, right? Like self-pleasure leads to orgasm. I think that's one of the big takeaways that I have in sex for me is, oh, I'm not shooting for orgasm. There's so much pleasure to be taken in the journey of discovery and slowness and without a destination in mind.
Yeah, love that. The other thing we talked about was intentionality, really setting aside time, lighting a candle, being intentional about the time you are going to self-pleasure, and thinking about the location and the time of day and how you're feeling at that time, whether you're in a full stomach or an empty stomach, or maybe you've had a drink, or maybe you've had a gummy, or maybe you've just had some water, or maybe you're sitting outside for a while before you go in. But really thinking about that instead of rushing through it.
I would also say is it doesn't have to be like that. Scheduling can actually help, right? Instead of waiting till, oh my gosh, I'm suddenly have this huge desire to self-pleasure, because that might not come. It's actually not how it works for me, right? I'm not going through my day and be like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to run into my bedroom or run wherever and self-pleasure. No, it's like, actually, I'm going to set aside the time. This evening, I don't have plans. I'm going to be home. No one's going to be home at the house at the same time. And I'm going to give myself a half an hour to set the stage, as you just said, like candles, dim lighting, take a few breaths, and then maybe it's 15 minutes of self-pleasure with no destination in mind. But it doesn't matter whether I want to or not. Like in the sense of, I feel like it serves me. So if I put it on my calendar to do it, then regardless of how I feel in the beginning, I always feel better at the end.
So this is so beautiful. It's such an important point, because I think for a while I had a hard time getting over the clinicality of even scheduled sex. Remember we had those gymnastics blowjob evenings, and where my daughter would go to gymnastics, and then like my husband and I would be like, okay, it's time for our blowjob. And at the beginning I was resistant to this. I was like, no, I don't want to put it on the calendar. It has to do with Google Calendar. But yeah, doing that really helps. And just like exercise, I would say, like, I don't, I'm like, I don't want to get up and run. But then after do I ever run and think, I wish I hadn't run? Never.
Yes, exactly.
So there is something to that scheduling.
And so that maybe is like one of the big takeaways here too, is that, what makes self-pleasure more pleasurable? If you think it's taking away like, I have to feel a certain way even before I start, is that make it more pleasurable by just identifying that it's a priority in your life, whether it's once a week, 3 times a week, whatever you want to start with, and just trust that, like exercise, it's going to be good for you, and just trust that, and then do that for a month.
Yeah.
And see how that goes.
Yeah, got it.
I actually think I'm going to take this my own advice. I'm going to report back.
Me too, because I am not on a self-pleasure kick right now at all.
Yeah.
And I'm like, when am I gonna, it just falls off. Kind of like meditation.
Right. Does. In a way, probably because I feel like, I don't really need it, but yet I bet I do. Yeah. If I'm just moving my life force energy, breathing, pleasuring, whether orgasm or not, that I know I'm going to feel better. Like something else is going to come through. Do that.
Exactly. So another angle to this was if you feel pain or if you feel like you can't get to the pleasure. And I think, Janelle, you spoke to the benefit of seeing a pelvic floor specialist who could really help you move some things around in that department.
Yes. Like if you have pain, and like if the question, which was what makes self-pleasure more pleasurable, is that actually, is there no pleasure at all because there's pain, then an invitation is to seek a pelvic floor specialist, because it could be that you have any number of things, but stuck energy, which is what my experience was, stuck energy. And then there was a numbness, right? There was not a lot of feeling. And so that could be useful as well.
And of course, like tools, lube, always a nice bonus if they work for you.
Lube, I would say lube for sure, and the tools are optional. Yeah.
Okay. And the other thing was that, if self-pleasure is not speaking to you right now for some reason, I mean, I do think I'm just going to reiterate what you said, that like, even if it's not speaking to you, give it a shot. But if it's just really not feeling like it's your thing, think about having pleasure in a different way. What else brings you pleasure? Is it licking frosting from your finger? Is it dancing? Is it hearing a weird kind of music? Is it the smell of a candle? Is it smelling flowers in your garden? Like something very simple that brings you pleasure.
Right. And so maybe that could also be the practice of like, okay, you're going to give yourself 15 minutes once a week to be very intentional about immersing yourself in pleasure, regardless of what that looks like.
Yeah, I love it.
Me too.
Okay, next one.
All right, I got it. Setting boundaries. This is the question from the Braveheart. Setting boundaries is hard. No.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, yeah. Setting boundaries is hard. Enforcing them is harder. How do I recognize when it is time to cut the cord with someone before my livelihood gets completely inverted?
So big. We'll just do the rest of the podcast on this. So there is this counterintuitive thing about there being freedom in boundaries, because it really is somewhat counterintuitive. It was to me at first. I'm just like, no, I'm setting a boundary. I'm hurting someone else. I'm stopping myself. But when you set those boundaries, and I think this person is saying this, like, she knows that, but she's like, what is that tipping point? And I think I want you to talk about this quote from Glennon Doyle, because I think that really is, so to me, that's the ultimate like litmus test.
Yes. So we already acknowledge that setting boundaries is hard, but the enforcing them, because setting the boundaries, okay, I'm telling someone not to do something, but now they've crossed the boundary or they're coming close.
They're pushing.
So now you actually, yes, they're pushing. So now you have to enforce something. And that means it probably an interaction with someone else. And Glennon Doyle of We Can Do Hard Things podcast was speaking to her daughter, and her daughter was like, but Mom, I'm afraid to disappoint you. And Glennon's response to her daughter was, it is always, always, always my expectation that you will disappoint me before you disappoint yourself.
Ooh, mic drop. So I want to like think about that, and I really want to tell my daughter that too. Although I think she is pretty good at it.
Your daughter's amazing at it. Yeah.
And I'm wondering too if there's a way to think about someone in your life who does have good boundaries, and witness and watch and observe them expressing their boundaries. I noticed it during the Braveheart retreat when people were just like saying, "Oh, this doesn't work for me. Oh no, that's not enough time for me. No, I'd actually like milk in my coffee. I'd like the oat milk," right? Just like expressing, like that's expressing what they want, but it's also saying, oh, here's my boundary. So really being, and so just watching that was inspiring because it gave me courage to set my own boundaries too. And what I've found is that watching my daughter, just not on purpose, but just inadvertently, remember I told you the story about so we were at a piano recital. We were finishing. We were with some other people who said, oh, we'd love to come over, and just hang out at your house. And, it was a relative, and both my husband and I were like, we kind of need some downtime. We didn't say that though. We were thinking it. We didn't want to disappoint this person. They were a relative. My daughter's in the back seat, and she's like, no. She's like, I need this downtime. Like, we've been so busy. Like, I only have 2 hours until this next thing starts. And my husband and I are looking at each other. She gets out of the car, goes over to the car with our relatives and said, I'm sorry. I didn't hear the conversation, but she got back in the car and she's like, I told her no. I'm like, okay.
Wow.
Thanks for taking care of that.
Wow. Right. And so recognizing that and I think I want to call out here is that in protecting herself, right? And you and your husband by extension, she was also protecting them because no one was going to be on their best in their most radiant, right? So it was going to be draining for everybody, and that's no fun.
Yeah. And I feel like too, there's a lot of power in the pause, which I forget constantly. I am just so in the habit of feeling like I have to answer things right away. And so it's okay to be like, I'm not sure if that works for all of us. Let me go talk to the rest of my family and see, and I'll be right back. Like, I would never say that, and that would be such a great idea. And then I guess I want to also speak to the other part of this question, which says, how do I recognize when it is time to cut the cord with someone before my livelihood gets completely inverted? For me, the ultimate question in a relationship right now, who knows how it'll be next month or next year, is that you may be having challenges with someone in a relationship, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's time to cut the cord, right? Because those challenges might be helping you in some way, or them in some way, or the relationship in some way. But ultimately, if your challenges are not leading to growth, then it's time to cut the cord. For me, that's what I've come to for me.
Yes, and I'm pausing because I'm like, oh, I remember when I was like, being in challenges that I was like, well, there has to be growth on the other side. And it was only in hindsight, I'm like, maybe that was more of a challenge than growth. Like the ratio was off. But I would also say how I would answer the question is, or at least to think about, do you not want to deal with them reacting to your boundaries? Like when you tell someone that here's my boundary, then they push it, and then you establish it again, and then they react a certain way, right?
Yeah.
Is it like, are you not wanting to set the boundary or enforce it because you don't want to deal with their reaction?
And this is something you pointed out to me a couple times in the past. Where I'm like, oh yeah, I just don't want to deal with that because that sounds like a hassle. It's a huge hassle.
Right.
And that is ultimately selfish.
Right.
And it's also selfish to be like, I have been in the situation where I'm like, no, I don't want to hurt them. No, I don't want to hurt them. I'm actually hurting them more by not setting the boundary. But that is counterintuitive sometimes in the moment.
Yeah. And all of it hard. I think the other recognition is that discomfort is part of setting and enforcing boundaries.
Yeah. Very true.
And so if you're thinking, oh, I'm supposed to be, this is supposed to be easy. Actually, it's not. This isn't one of being human.
So annoying.
Setting boundaries is easy. So it's also, can you increase your capacity for the discomfort of setting your own boundary so that the reward comes of freedom and radiance and taking care of yourself and being resourced, ultimately being resourced.
Totally. And let me just say that I wanted to have a temper tantrum about all of this sometimes. I'm just like, discomfort leads to growth. I'm so tired of hearing that. I'm so tired of listening to it. Like, it's true. And it gets, it's hard. It's super hard.
And discerning when is the discomfort leading to growth is the thing you did say in the middle of that. Because there's some discomfort that is not growth oriented.
Yes.
Which is what I had to learn. You've had to learn.
Yes. Got it. Okay. So next question. I'm struggling to know if leaning into sexuality is harmful or healing during a time of healing and grief. And is the sexuality external validation, or can it be a healing connection?
And so just because these are anonymous questions, right? We don't know the backstory. So we're not assuming we know what's going on here. So some part of our response are actually just asking more questions so that someone could reflect a little bit more because we don't have this backstory, right? And so for me, one of the questions when I heard this was, well, how does leaning into the sexuality make you feel?
Warm or numb?
Right. Like, okay, so I'm hearing that you also are feeling grief. Right, there's a healing period that you're in and grief. And so when you engage in sexuality with someone else, how does it feel inside? Is it warm? Is it yummy? Is it like taking a breath? Or is it filled with, fill in the blank, self-doubt, constriction, concern? Yeah.
Great. And then, is it really step back and say, am I avoiding the feelings of pain and grief, or is this helping me process them?
Yes.
Right. So that's just the ultimate question.
Right. Is the leaning into this other sexuality a distraction from actually processing and healing whatever hurt and grief?
Yeah, exactly. And this distraction also can lead to, are you trying to just shift your feelings onto someone else? In some way, rather than actually taking care of you, right? Are they just becoming a distraction? We're like, I'm going to go take care of them instead of taking care of me,
right?
Which is definitely what happens. I think in grief is that it's happened to me. Oh, I have to take care of them, therefore I'll just put my grief aside. I just keep putting my grief aside. Keep putting my grief aside.
Yes, I think you're bringing up a really good point, which is I don't want to assume that sexuality at all, in consent and when it's nourishing, is bad. But what I really want to call out in this question is that feeling your grief, which might feel bad, is actually good.
Mm-hmm. Just hard. So hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like processing grief is like, we've had grief rituals over here at Reflection on the other side of the Goddess Temple of grieving together, like actually getting together to intentionally grieve might be another unexpected way to have moved through.
Yeah, that's a great point. And then, and that's something to think about. The external validation or something outside is usually driven by the ego. And so there tends to be more of an urgency about that. Like, I got to get out of this. I'm in a panicked state. I'm in an anxious state. God, somebody save me, right? And that typically is probably not the healthiest route, right? How healing is more related to being something, and it's not hurried. It's not fast. It's not about an outcome. It's about the during and the process. So just things to keep in mind too.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, next question. I'm in a weeks-old DS relationship. DS, by the way, is dominant submissive relationship. My D has another S. So my dom has another submissive. I've been triggered in my last relationship about not being monogamous. And I think I really want to be in a monogamous long-term relationship.
Okay. So, a lot of questions we would probably ask, this Braveheart. If you're not sure this is right, consider what is drawing you into this relationship. Is it a true desire, or is it more of an existential kink?
Or do you want to feel desired? Although maybe we should go into what an existential kink is.
Yeah. I'm gonna ask. I can describe this, but I don't know. I don't feel very confident about my description. Do you feel good about explaining existential kink?
There's a book.
I think you read the whole book.
I did read the whole book, but since I didn't know I don't have the author's name, but you can look up existential kink, and it's this idea that there's something that you are drawn to, like a pattern, an addiction, right? That's not necessarily good for you, but is giving you a hit, and it's the hit that you're like the dopamine hit or whatever that you're really drawn to. But then this is all subconscious.
Yeah, and this feeling that you're seeking could be just a familiar feeling, right? Yeah. If you were abused in any way growing up, verbally, physically, whatever, like you might, even though wasn't healthy, it is a state or a position that you're really accustomed to, really familiar with, and that feels like easy for you. Or
there's a comfort to it.
Yes, a comfort. And so you have to be aware of, like, is there just like, obviously that's why it's called existential kink, that like in the bedroom, it's like, oh, I want you to do this to me, this kind of bizarre thing. This is more like in life. What is it that you're drawn to? Oh, you're drawn to being dominated because your dad was dominant. And then suddenly you're in a dominant relationship that isn't serving you, but felt right because you were accustomed to that. So that is the existential kink I would ask about. Like, is this about true desire, or is it an existential kink that you're moving toward?
And I would say that it's not because you want to be in a DS relationship. That's not where the existential kink is. The existential kink is actually that you're choosing to be in a relationship that's polyamorous, not monogamous, when you're naming that you want to be monogamous. So that's where the kink is. It's not actually...
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely.
BDSM piece of it.
And then the question is, like, what is true for sure for you? Like, what is a true statement? You want to be in a monogamous long-term relationship. Why are you in this one when someone is clearly polyamorous?
And so is there a sense of like, oh, you like the feeling of having attention put on you, and you'd rather have some attention that is incomplete than no attention? Could be one thing.
Absolutely.
And, do you also have some maybe, whether it's defensiveness or like, oh, is it not okay to be monogamous, right? Are you doubting yourself because maybe you're in a world where everyone else you know, the people you're around feel that polyamorous is cool or that, you know, and as, just to throw out there, Andrea and I, while we're both poly, we're not advocates for poly. We actually want people to know that they can choose monogamy. And so in your case, like, you're aware there's lots of other relationship formats. And are you like, having to really own the fact that you're monogamous?
Yeah.
And sometimes discovering the trueness of yourself can be scary.
That's really true. Okay. Thinking about
next question.
Sorry, next question. Thinking about the future, making plans for what I want, lack of clarity, and what my true self wants. And I'm currently writing a keynote about the idea that purpose is amazing, but it's not the place to start. Permission is the place to start.
Woo woo.
So, because in a sense, purpose has become this commodity, this thing to do, this place to fail, this thing we can't quite get accomplished, another thing on our list. And it can often lead us astray when we're listening to these other voices, right? So, take a sound bath, go to a mindfulness retreat, like listen to Tim Ferriss, start a paleo diet, get up at 6 a.m, start doing Pilates, read this famous person's book. And those can be helpful, but they're all coming from outside of you. And I'm an advocate, because it was one of the things that changed my life the most, was taking time to go within. And so what we really need to do is go within, like spend time truly alone, which is challenging for a lot of us. I get it. Like, you have kids, you got partners, but even 20 minutes totally alone, not tracking, like anything, it really gives you time to do that.
And I'm going to qualify alone, to me, means no input. So it's actually one of the things I added that was part of the Braveheart retreat, which was that the expectation was each day that you were here, that you would take 15 minutes of alone time with no input, which no input means no music, no journaling,
certainly no phone,
no reading, right? Because what you're trying to do is listen to the within.
That's really good. Yeah, I have to slip that in. No outside input is really a big part of it. And I've just been talking about, like, creating this ritual in the morning, which, you know, I've played with different rituals over the years, and so have you, of just really being like the 3 C's now I've decided about rituals is consistency, obviously, but that kind of goes without saying, but it is so important. Compassion for yourself as you get uncomfortable by being alone. And then the clarity, and you have to have clarity without the input. So it's clear, there's nothing else coming in. It's just you. And I think that's really worked for me.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing is that it's not that you're going in with clarity. It's like, I just know if I spend time alone, eventually clarity will come.
Yes. Bingo. And when making a decision, you know, this person is thinking, what plans do I make? How do I decide? I know decision making used to be far more excruciating for me. And really doing a triple check, like head, heart, body. Like, okay, how does this feel in my head from a logical perspective, from a Google Calendar perspective? How does my heart feel about this? What are my emotions? How am I feeling when I say this word, when I voice this idea? And then really in your body, like, where is the tension? Is it in your legs? Is it in your stomach? Are you clenching? Like, where do you feel and what do you feel when you ask this of yourself?
I would love to add, to fine tune that a little bit more, to take apart the body a little bit. So it's head, heart, gut.
Okay.
What do you feel in your stomach? Because there's so much
in the stomach.
And then sex. How does your sex feel?
Oh, okay.
Right? Because that's where life force energy, the womb energy, that can be there. So is a spark of creativity coming from there? So if it's head, if it's heart, gut, sex.
Huh. Do you always do you feel like there's always a feeling in each of those places?
Maybe not, but I'm not sure. But I think if you ask yourself, if you allow yourself to ask the question, something will come through. And so if you're like, there is no feeling, for example,
then that's an answer.
Then
right?
that's its own answer.
Yeah, got it. Okay, that makes sense.
Right?
Okay.
Because it could be you're like, I don't know what my gut's feeling. All I can do is hear my head.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I have to come up with an acronym for that. HHGS. Okay, noted. Okay. Oh yeah. So we're moving on to our men Bravehearts. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I guess I don't know if that even matters if you knew that all those questions were asked by women.
Oh no, I guess it doesn't. I was just like noticing that. Oh, we're being videoed. We can't see the clock.
No, I don't have one in here.
Oh well. Okay. So next question is your turn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some good tools and techniques to handle jealousy when your partner has other sex and or dom sub partners?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to add in or other like other polyamorous partners.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's that first one for you? I've heard about this so much. Like this is like an old one. This is vintage by now.
This is vintage, yeah. But also real. Yeah. So my number one advice on this topic is don't do QuickBooks when your partner is going out on their date. This is literally speaking from experience. Instead, do something enjoyable.
Right. Or if you enjoy QuickBooks, great. But
yeah. It was actually maybe like the reverse of that is that I was doing the thing that was the most painful.
While he was out.
Yeah.
That's
in fact, that I hadn't even thought about that. Is that I was like intentionally martyring myself.
Yeah. Got it. Yeah. Be proactive about managing the time. Like this is something I wish I would have known in the beginning, right? Like when are they telling you that they're going out? How much information do you want to know? How much information do they want to share? When are they coming home? When they come home, are they going to smell like that person? Have them put some cologne on. Are they going to sleep with you when they get home? Are they going to sleep on the couch? Are you going to talk about what happened that night? Are you going to talk about it in the morning? Like there's so many things that you can like basically props that you can put around this event that for me helped eventually manage my jealousy and my anxiety when my husband was going out.
And everything that Andrew just said is from like a wizened woman who's lived through this experience, right? So the shortcut that she just gave you was like rewatch what she did, what we did, or just re-listen and write these things down, because these are just things like you don't know that these are questions to ask until you've lived them. Now Andrew's lived them, and so now you can be like, oh, do these matter to me or not? I'm working with I have a couple that I'm doing poly coaching with, and we're going through some of this stuff. They're just opening up their relationship for the first time and recognizing, okay, we're going to create a bunch of questions. What are like these kind of, I don't even want to say they're safeguards, but we're trying to premeditate could be the sticking points as we venture out into this new territory, but then also recognizing that a sticking point in this case, like the questions that you had may not be for them, but but they're aware that there's going to be sticking points, so to look for them so that like this is a living experience, this is an experiment rather, and that okay, we found a sticking point on this one, and so now the next time we're going to do things a little bit differently, and they're navigating it so beautifully because it's like, oh, we didn't think about that. We had guests when one of them got home, so they couldn't talk right away. So okay, maybe next time we think through that differently.
Yeah, and
but you're not. My point being, you're not going to know all of the questions ahead of time.
Yeah, because everyone's different, and every family's different, every household is different, and you're going to change your mind. You're going to be like, oh, I'm good with that. Like, because linearly you will be good with it, and then when it happens, your body will not be happy. That's how it happened for me. And so typically, like, my body had a hard time catching up with my head. Constantly.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. Also asking yourself, are you jealous of what they have? Like, do you want what they have? Do you want another partner that you're going and having sex with? Or are you feeling possessive of them? Like, there's two very different feelings.
Very different. Very different.
So, like, we spent a lot of time discerning the difference between these. And they were both present sometimes, you know, or neither one of them were present. Or I was like, oh, yeah, I'm not actually jealous. I actually just want what he has and I don't have it.
Yes.
So,
and that's so important because like in my case, right? Like, oh, I want what he has and I'm actively denying myself it. It's not like I was being denied it by him. There was like I was in a way like, I don't know, self-sabotaging, but kind of, right? Like I was, there was a deep part of me that like wanted what he had, but then I was like, no, it has to come from you.
Yeah. And, you know, I'm thinking too, like this could be about anything. Like maybe you're jealous about how much time he spends with, or how much time your partner spends with their friends.
Right. Or playing golf.
Or, yeah, exactly. Anything.
Or going shopping,
right,
whatever.
Right. And really it leads to what Janelle was saying, like, are you able to ask for what you want? Are you caught in a pattern of not asking for what you want because you really only ask for what you want when you know you can get it? Because one of my friends went through that. She's like, oh, no, there's no way I would ask for what I want unless I knew it was a sure thing.
Right. And so then you're not even giving the other person the opportunity to give it to you.
Exactly.
And really coming back to then, it's so, if you are blaming, this is a kind of a sign, I would say, with this, is that if you're blaming the other person, then I invite you to look in the mirror and be, okay, so what is it that I'm not asking for or providing for myself, right? Because if you're making it about the other person, that they've done something to you, then chances are you're not standing up consciously or unconsciously for what it is that you need.
Yeah, or your boundaries aren't being held.
Right.
Potentially,
and you might not, you know, in my journey, I recognized, oh, I was honoring my partner's boundaries and I was not honoring my own.
Right.
Like I was self-abandoning my own boundaries.
Yeah.
Did we answer the question? What are some good tools and techniques?
Yeah.
Okay. No, there's another one.
Oh, we did. Yeah.
No, but there's actually a tool, right?
Oh, okay.
Is that jealousy is part of the game, I think, for most of us who are in relationships where other partners are there, and that knowing how to manage our emotions is a very important tool when we're swimming in these waters. And so there's emotional release tools, which we've talked about in another episode, and they're concrete, like there's 7 tools. You can use them to move the energy through your body. Because back to what I was just saying, if you're feeling jealous, it may not be, if there's energy, there's something there, but that's not necessarily your partner's fault, right? You have to look at yourself as well in this and acknowledge that your feelings are your responsibility.
Yeah, this is about owning your emotions. I did this for years. I'm just like, I'm crying and it's because of you. Like, just blame. And that was, it's been a huge shift in our relationship. It's like, oh, I'm feeling a charge. Yes, I'm upset with you because of this. Or, no, you know what? I'm feeling a charge and it's not your fault. It's nothing to do with you.
Right. Even if the charge came up because
of them. Absolutely.
It's still not their fault. This is how you're responding.
Yes. And you can still be angry with them. That's fair, but their emotion is your own. So that's huge. And I also just encourage you to reframe the definition of choice. We kind of think of choice for some reason like we have to pick one thing. And what if that person was choosing both of you, right? Like my husband is choosing me and someone else. And I have chosen him and someone else at times. And I choose them both. And this is just like, it's really a simple concept, but it's hard for us because we just kind of feel like we want to be the only one chosen.
Yeah,
It's been a hard thing to grasp and get over.
Right. And so I would say agree with you, and from a foundational level, you really can only get there if you have these emotional release tools, if you're looking at yourself versus blaming someone else. Like these are some of the ways to get to the state of like, that there is enough love to go around.
Okay, next question. How do we navigate the tension between physical experience for its own sake and the deepening richness of connection and emotion? So my first thing comes up for me is, as long as there's kindness and consent, there's no need to feel shame about anything physical. It's just as simple as that. But this could be a long journey for you depending on your past and what you've experienced. But I do think some things are about the physicality.
Yeah, and as someone who believes in pleasure as a birthright, that pleasure looks lots of different ways. Some people, and this comes back to some of the training that I've been through from Kadeshka, which puts a sexual desire on the medicine wheel. And some people, and Andrea, you and I have different expressions of this, right? Like there's a physicality that you are drawn to, right? When people like squeeze your arms for you, even is something that like there's a pleasure
pushing
in
in the
and so. And then for me, the connection, like an eye gazing for me is something that can really like melt me. Not to say that it can't melt you, but that there's a difference and there's no wrong or right. And so physicality is part of the experience that all of us have. I want to be like, yay. Physical is just as important as an emotional connection. Some of us need it tied together more. Some of it needs it tied together less. Some of us just don't need it together at all. So,
and it can look lots of different ways, right? Like physicality could be sex, or it could be pushing, or it could be laughing, or it could be shaking, or lying together. Many different things.
Right. And so if you want physical experience and you want deepening richness of connection and emotion, like I believe, yes, you can have it all, but you might not have it all with the same person.
Very true. Next question.
Can you describe a community that feels spiritually open? This question, when it came in, I was like, I'm not exactly sure how to answer this.
Yeah, I was just kind of like guessing with my answers here. Like, like what came to mind for me was radical acceptance, curiosity, no judgment, explanation of ritual.
Thank you for saying all that, because that reminded me of Jamie Wheal's book, Recapture the Rapture, which is, and one of his premises is like, you know, how to spot a culty cult and how to be a non-culty cult leader, which is, you know, are you in a place that is claiming spirituality, but yet they are asking you to make decisions at moments of altered
state.
An altered state.
Okay,
or are they asking you to not listen to your inner whispers and instead say that those are wrong, and that there's a group of people, one or a group of people who know more than you. Right? They know better than you do about yourself.
Yeah, that's for sure a red flag.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my answer is going to be read the book, Recapture the Rapture by Jamie Wheal.
I think setting a container with protocol, I don't know if that's open spiritually necessarily, but it just feels like a community that I want to be a part of.
Right. And I would say that that's actually in this book. Here's like the 10 things of, if your leader is doing these things, then this could be okay. If they're or maybe if they're not doing these things, and these are red flags.
Okay. I think I want to say one more thing about this, in that you personally, this is just speaking for myself, I want a spiritually open community, but I don't want just a community that is open to everything and therefore has no identity. And this, I've been in a couple communities like this over the last, say, 10 to 15 years. And I thought, oh, this is just, it's just open to everything. So everything's okay, but I don't know what they actually stand for. So to me, don't confuse an open identity or open spiritual experience with no identity or no spiritual experience. Like, it's okay to put stake a claim.
And something that feels true for you, or that you're
exactly. So the question was, what was your sex education like? What were the influences, and where did you learn about it currently?
I'm so excited for this question.
Do you like talking about sex ed?
I do, because I feel that as a culture in America, we are so devoid of sex ed and education.
Yeah.
Right? Like my half semester of health when I was in 7th grade, right? Did not.
That's what was supposed to prepare you for life.
For life, right? So I learned.
Shit show. That's terrible. Yeah.
So I've learned a lot from ISTA International School of Temple Arts, where it's a retreat I've talked about many times, where I've learned about safer sex conversations. So what I'm going to just do, the person who answered this question actually is a sex ed facilitator. So actually, he lobbed me a softball here because I love knowing if there's other options. So we've talked about the safer sex conversation that is called STARS, and the website for that is Make Time for the Talk. And these conversations have helped my nervous system relax immensely before I have intimacy so that I can experience more pleasure.
Right. We also talked about the RBDSM-AT conversation. Again, that's RBDSM-AT that you can Google as well.
Yep. And that is another acronym for the same type of safer sex conversation. And then my friend Sam told me about 2 adult sex ed programs. One is called Our Whole Lives. The acronym there is OWL, O-W-L. And it's a sex ed for adults that fosters informed, values-based, responsible decision-making and education.
Super.
And then the other one was everyonedeservessexed.com.
Amazing. Everyonedeservessexed.com.
Yeah. Like, whoa. And I don't know which one, but one of them teaches it age appropriate and one of them is teaching it for adults. So guess what? As adults, there's actually programs for us.
I think it's kind of funny that we've never talked about this before, or I've never even asked. Like,
that's why I was like, this is so important.
It really is. Yeah. Because I just think of it as like something for my teenage daughter. Right. Which is kind of ridiculous because like we got it when we were 15. I think how much our bodies and minds have changed since then.
Yeah. And as culture has changed and all of it. So yeah. So there's actually resources. Amazing out there.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. Very cool. Okay. Last question. How do I find ways to overcome previous baggage and trust issues and the insecurities resulting from them?
Short answer, personal growth. It's a journey towards self-love. That's it. And we're done.
Yeah. Super easy. Just like do that. Just do that. Personal growth. Journey to self-love. Figure it out. Oh my God. Or as my friend Mary says, I'm not doing that self-love intimacy shit. That's I have another friend who says that all the time too. She's like, ugh, this self-love shit. Gotta tell you, it's totally the way to go. One thing I will say is that accepting that you may never put down this baggage and you were just going to carry it differently and manage it better and carry the backpack on your head or on your back or on
at least
a cart.
maybe just get the wheels fixed.
Keep tuning those wheels, keep greasing. Maybe like put it on a scooter. Maybe it's going to be on a bike. I don't know. But like one of my friends, this magical friend I met at Folk Fest for like 3 hours. I haven't never talked to again. Hopefully I'll see her next Folk Fest. And she's like, oh no, I carry my rocks, like a little like hobo, like on a stick with a little handkerchief. She's like, I carry them around everywhere. She's like, I'm never putting them down. She's like, they're my rocks. She's like, I rearrange them. I look at them. Sometimes I take one out. Sometimes I put it back in. But they're my rocks. And so she almost has like possession and ownership of them. And this has helped her go from them being baggage to them being empowering.
Right. Like saying like, oh, I actually had someone say this to me, which was so beautiful. I was like, okay, well, what do you need? He's like, I have an abandonment wound. So he's like, if we're going to stop dating, I just ask that you let me know and that you don't ghost me. He's like, I'm not expecting us to do this forever. He's like, I'm just letting you know that it'll really hurt me if you just ghost me. And I'm like, oh, I don't, right? Like that, like the pressure is off to be like, oh my God, I have to love you forever. Instead, it was just like, oh yeah, can I respect you as another human being? Absolutely.
Beautiful. And I think that in addition, so just a little tactical idea is I find that my insecurities come up when I am saying something and I'm watching that person's facial expression and I want them to look a certain way and they look a different way, and I am then triggered into my insecurity or into my issues. And so a great way to do it is to sit back to back and talk about things, because then I'm not watching. I'm not expecting, I'm not looking for or being scared of a look that my dad had or that an old friend had that caused this or whatever that is. Nothing really about my dad. But like just, yeah, I think it's important because I do at least, I take that in and I make it part of me when I see a particular expression and then I just add it to my insecurity. So sometimes, sometimes that can help, but.
I love that. That's a really nice tool, right? So the 2 tools that we're saying here is like acknowledge that you have them. It's okay, and we'll always have them. Like this isn't like personal growth and journey towards self-love is. We're not actually saying it's going towards like the goal is enlightenment. It's sort of like the goal is an orgasm. It's like, oh, there's a journey along the way. We're gonna find tools. We're gonna find things, and so like recognizing, oh yeah, part of my journey involves the baggage and the insecurities that whatever they are that you have, and that, okay, how can I deal with them? Wow, one way is to sit back to back when having a conversation, when we're talking about them, just so that I can focus on how I'm feeling in my own body versus paying attention to the facial expressions of the person I'm sharing when it feels really vulnerable to me. Yeah.
And another like little extension of that is, if it's better for you, face them and be touching so that you're being comforted as they are talking.
Yeah.
That's huge.
I'm a huge fan of being touched. Like having, when we figured that
out.
Like, hi friend.
Hi. Yeah. Like it feels good to be held while you're having the difficult conversation.
Yeah. True.
Okay. This has been our first Braveheart Q&A. Hope you've enjoyed it. I just want to say, if you're interested in the Braveheart Conversations at all, in Denver, maybe in Philly, maybe in Boston, whichever.
Maybe in New York.
Maybe in New York.
We don't know. So look at permissiontobehuman.live.
Exactly.
Because we now have an events page on the website.
Sure do. Yes. And of course, check us out on Instagram. Happy to get any questions or calls about permission to be human or anything we're doing. We love you, Bravehearts.
Love you.
Do you need permission to be human? You got it. Listen, subscribe, and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Learn more about us at permissiontobehuman.live.